All right. This is for you.
Thank you.
Yep. Sorry, I know there's not a
Oh,
lot
I'm
of
sorry,
room.
you have a pen there.
Yeah, of course. There's tons of there. All right, so the first thing that I wanna discuss today is that, looking back at your Unit 2 assessment compared to your Unit 3, on Unit 2, you had an average of 55% correct. For Unit 3, you had an average of 63. One thing I also wanna note is that like your average not only went up, but your highest performers were then taken out of the class since your last unit
Mhm.
assessment. So what steps did you take to make that happen?
I was a lot more clear, and I made sure that my lesson plans, like the objectives, they've been writing the objective down every day, which I think has really helped, so they kind of understood what was going on in the beginning. And I made sure that the all of the things that were done in the lesson plan, like in the I do, you do, and all of that, were aligned to the exit ticket, which I think I noticed on some of them, like the exit ticket would have questions that just didn't really make sense to like what we did in the lesson.
Great, go ahead and write that down.
And I also got to do like a lot of reteaches that I did straight off of like how they did on their other exit tickets.
Cool. That was great. I think like an 8% increase is great, and like if we keep going in that direction, you'll be at 71% on your next unit assessment. And I think it's especially like important, like I said, to note that like your highest performers are taken out of the class, so that's awesome. So today I want to dive into A403 and assessment question number 11 on your accommodated test, because it seemed
Mhm.
like more kids took the accommodated. Okay.
That's the biggest one.
So can you go ahead and pull up the standards breakdown that you did?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And here's question number 11, here's the exemplar. What I want you to do is take 1 minute, go ahead and write down what should a student know or be able to do to show mastery of this question in standard.
Should I write it on here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So what are some of the things that you named?
So for how to know, they have to know what like terms are, what are inverses or like the inverses, what it means to isolate the variable, what are the constant terms and the variable terms, and then like multiplication and division, addition, subtraction.
Yep. So I had those as like the do. I had
I
that
may
they.
have flipped them. I always flip them.
Oh, you're fine. They have to be able to distribute. I said that they have to be able to know that in order to isolate the variable, they have to apply order of operations backwards.
Okay.
That's the way I think of it. And then they have to be able to apply those things, so addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, all that good stuff that you named. Great. So what were the keys to an ideal answer at number 6? What were you looking for when you graded it?
You mean 11?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
6. I was looking at 6 on your paper.
Distribution was probably the biggest,
Mhm.
so accurately distributing, especially since it's a negative, making sure that they understood that the -3 and the negative, or the -5 would make a +15, and then inverse operations. Yep.
Great. Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to take a look at a student exemplar. Now for the student exemplar, I looked at a gen ed. The question is a little bit different. So take a look, but it's the same standard. So take a look at number 12. How did the student exemplar compare in this case? What did the student do to show you that they understand?
So they rewrote the problem, which is really awesome, and they they put all the inverses in here. So you saw like the subtracting 15. They didn't do the adding the 2x, but you can tell because if you follow like line by line, it's got the right steps, and including the dividing by -2 as well.
Yeah. And so how does that compare to the teacher exemplar? Like what is something that you would have pushed that student? You said it with the 2x. What would you have pushed the student to do?
To write down the 2x and like write down every single step that you wanted to see.
Yep. For those inverse operations.
Yeah.
Great. So now what I want you to do is I want you to take 2 minutes. We're going to look at some students who did not successfully solve number 11. And I want you to consider what are the key gaps between the rest of our student work and the exemplar.
Okay.
So here's some ones. These are some of your medium kiddos.
Okay.
You can write down the key gaps that you see.
So the biggest one is distribution was probably the most common step is either they didn't distribute or they distributed wrong. Like a lot of people did the -3 times -5 and they put -8 and they added it and didn't multiply them.
So looking at like this, like let's specifically focus on this guy where they did distribute.
Yeah.
So this one, this guy.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. I think you're right. They kind of just missed they dropped the variable in that one. Let's take a look at this one and this one. So in this case, they both
distributed right.
Yeah. So I took out the one where they didn't distribute right.
And then I noticed that they divided the inverses. A lot of people they didn't take the negative with them, so they divided by +6 and not -6.
Okay.
So the inverses were also kind of.
So let's focus now back on our like how you broke down what they had to know and do. Thinking about the language of the standard and what we just charted.
Yeah.
What are the key misconceptions?
Distribution and inverse operations.
Okay. Saying more about inverse operations. What is the intention of doing those inverse operations? What are they trying to do?
Isolate the variable.
Isolating the variable, which is why I showed this one because they kind of just got rid of the variable.
Yeah.
So, based off of that, what are some of the procedural gaps that you named?
Like the steps, like the distribution step.
Distributing and
the subdividing by the wrong number, the inverse.
Which ultimately made it hard for them to then
Isolate the
variable. So what I want you to go ahead and write down for this is that, students did not properly follow the steps. So you can put in parentheses distribution, inverse operations. Because they did not understand what it means to isolate the variable. Great. So, what we're going to do next is we're going to plan a reteach. based off of your data, do you think that this should be a guided discourse or a model?
Model,
Yeah, tell me why.
because, since it's more like procedural, that they need to understand, what it means, like to isolate a variable,
Well,
and this,
Yep, go ahead.
and the
Go ahead.
steps in order that you need to do before you can even get to that part.
Okay, so I agree that we do want to model the steps, but there
Mhm.
is a conceptual piece, which is what? What
The
it-
not understanding how to isolate the variable.
Yeah, so when the big thing that I always think about when it comes to like a guided discourse or a model,
Yeah.
it's okay that you don't know this because this is our first weekly data meeting, is that guided discourse is we do that when we see more than 50% mastery,
Okay.
and then a model would be less than 50%. So for this one, I saw less than 50%
Okay.
mastery on this question, so that's why we're gonna go ahead and do a model.
Okay.
So I pulled a question, a task that you can use to reteach this,
Mhm.
and our key area to reteach is how to isolate the variable. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna take 5 minutes to script the think aloud and the questions, and then we're gonna spar.
Think aloud and questions. Okay.
Yep.
So
Okay.
should I do the actual problem as well?
Yeah, so however you would like script your think aloud for,
Got it.
yep. Oh, time's up, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, finished, but you'll get the gist. Okay, here you go, we can spar. Some of the things that I see on here that are really great is like you use the phrase non-variable term, which I think will help Sam, like the idea of isolating the variable, and also like your last check of checking the answer and modeling what that looks like, I think is great. What are some things that you can steal from?
Yeah, so you wrote, like the very beginning, what's the difference between an equation and an expression, which I think is really important in understanding like the equal sign, like has a meaning in the problem. And then you said, we were going to isolate like the variable, like really emphasizing what isolating the variable means, and you said too the goal of solving an equation is to isolate the variable, and like what does that mean? And they said to get the variable on one side of the equal sign, so a lot more like of the emphasis on like the meaning of isolating a variable, and like in order to understand isolating the variable you must know that it's an equation and not an expression, which I didn't have at all.
And I think to your point earlier, like what you were just about to say is also like the, to understand the procedural steps, you have to understand the conceptual steps, like what it means to, or the conceptual piece of like what it means to isolate the variable. Great. So now that we have the task and the model, what are you going to monitor when you, during practice for this?
The first step, the distribution step, to make sure that that is being done accurately, because if that's not done, then the rest of it. And then also checking to make sure the inverses and step-by-step calculation, because some people just start like skipping all of it, thinking they can like do it in their head, and a lot of errors can happen because these have multiple steps in them. So making sure that like the students are actually line by line
working backwards to do to solve for
the variable.
Yep, isolate that variable.
Yep.
Great. Okay, so then our next step is to plan the reteach, so go ahead and open up your quarterly plan.
Okay.
Great. When is the time, I would say in the next couple of days, when you can reteach this? Oh, you can have this.
Oh, thank you. So it looks like I have a reteach of lesson plan 50 on here, but
which is what day?
the Thursday, Friday, 11/21, 11/22. So.
Is there a time this week you can reteach? Maybe on Thursday and Friday?
Yeah, Thursday, Friday, I could do like 2 lessons.
Great.
Teach it.
Great, let's plan on that. And then after that, I think like considering that our next unit is short and we're also getting them ready for the next IA, what are some times that we can spiral this into our lesson? Either like in a do now or homework?
So definitely like all of the do nows, they can get put in, because now what we're doing is we're just taking what we learned in the last unit and adding an inequality versus like the equal sign.
Okay.
So in most of the do nows, the do now is like solving for an equation. So spiraling that in there.
Great. Why don't we name 2 spots in our quarterly plan and in our do nows where we'll spiral in?
Okay. So I'm pretty sure I just did the next week's lesson plans, and they all have them already in there.
Great. And then is it in any homework, or is it just on
No, I can add homework for like I can put in a couple of homework problems for each lesson.
Perfect.
And then also the week before the IA, I have like that boot camp.
Perfect.
And that'd be like a really good time.
Yeah, let's go ahead and note that too. Boot camp. I know that that's a little far out, but I think it'll definitely come up. It's definitely going to be on the IA. Alright. And then are there any students that you feel like you need to pull for like tutoring
Yes.
Let's talk about them.
So there's like a lot of students who are just pretty much, I think, struggling, like Javion,
Okay.
Jalen.
Do you want to write them down on your
Yeah.
plan sheet?
So Javion Hall, Jalen Cooper,
Great.
Deshaun Sweet,
Do you see them during kickoff?
and Ashton. I see Deshaun Sweet, and that's it.
Is there a day this week?
Or
you
maybe
could
Ashton, I'm not quite sure.
have them come to your kick block?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. The thing with Javion, like Javion's a really hard worker. He's got
He's
a
a
really
little
low
slower,
IQ.
yeah.
And so he just gets really confused with inverses. Jalen, I can't get. He like wouldn't even take the test.
I saw your note, yeah.
Yeah, I tried to make him do the corrections. He wouldn't do those either. He's
I would-
just
with him, I would honestly give a call home. So it's good.
okay.
Yeah.
And then Deshaun Smeet is kind of similar. He's really hard to get to work.
He just had his IEP meeting too, which is strange.
He's like such a sweet student when he's having a good day, but he's just got a lot of, like, it's just really hard to get him to.
For him, I would talk to Mr. Small too about strategies because I know he works with him pretty closely.
Okay. And Ashton's another really low.
Yeah. So maybe the one thing do you have kick block today and Thursday?
Today, I have the study skills Monday, Wednesday.
Sorry,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So I would maybe even think about like doing two groups of like pulling these two together and then these two together. if we
Okay.
can. Cool.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, and then my other class, Janai's never in class anymore.
Janai Edgerton.
She's like always gone, like she hasn't been in my class like,
And you're putting in the missing chat?
yeah, and they say she's just like not in school.
Okay, I'll
Yeah.
check. I'll follow up on that.
Yeah, so because Janai's not doing very well, Namibia, someone I need to pull out. But, and Davrian,
And these are also people because you have a co-teacher that like when you're planning a
I
reteach.
can pull 'em out.
Yep.
and,
That's perfect.
and for some reason, weirdly, I don't know if you saw in the Marian's test, he just didn't do any work.
Okay. Yeah.
And like, he's very capable, I think he's just,
I would have a conversation with him too.
okay.
I did see your note on that one too. And then the last thing is, so you're gonna do this reteach on Thursday, Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Can you send me your data by end of the day on Monday?
Yeah.
On how students do. So
And then the data would just be exit ticket data?
yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I would say like a goal for mastery for this would be 80%. So that's our goal.
Okay.
Questions?
Nope.
All right. I think that's it for this, and then I just have a couple other things that we can follow up on
Yeah.
about stuff. Oops.